Energy is inherently a part of everything we do in our lives, but one of the least understood things.
I can see a future where there is limitless and free energy. And that's a pretty beautiful world to live in.
Welcome back to another episode of Power to the People. We only got Derek here today. Rob is down in RE Plus in Vegas, enjoying his time down there. So Derek, it's just you and I today. And I think this is going to be a really cool episode because I think one of the things that I think is very misunderstood about, call it a CEO, co-founder, or just somebody at the head of a company. On the outside, it always looks like you got your shit together. But on the inside, sometimes it's a little bit chaotic. And I also realize when you operate at that higher level, there aren't a lot of people to turn to in order to solve those problems. And so I wanted to start with just throughout your life, I mean, how did you start to not only train that, but were there mentors along the way or even that you currently have that have kind of helped shape how you navigate this growth?
Man, I love this question. This is like one of those subjects that and by the way, good morning, Steve.
Good morning.
This is one of those subjects I've always been inspired by the idea of having the opportunity to speak about this in a way at which might reach a lot of people. We've all, especially now with social media and YouTube being what it is, there's a million business gurus out there that'll tell you all about this stuff. And a lot of the authentic guys, the story is very similar. That said, there's everybody's different. We all come from different backgrounds and different situations. And I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that authentically have rags to riches stories. And I'd put myself in that group, right? Rags being the operative term, how rags were you, compared to riches. But, being that I didn't have a college education, I didn't come from generational wealth of any kind. I didn't have a birthright nest egg of any kind. It was just, I came from a very small business entrepreneurial family that was just living not necessarily paycheck to paycheck. It was more sale to sale. I grew up with my dad talking about, coming home and around the dinner table, we're talking about the sales that he was making because that's how we were paying the bills, and that's small of a business. 10, less than 10 employees is what I grew up around. And a lot of time when I was young, it was 3-4 employees. So my first mentor, of course, was my dad. My mom was a mentor in a way at which, I saw what it looked like to be operationally supporting somebody that was a deal maker, a people person, a strategist. My dad intentionally kept the business small because he loved his free time. He wanted to spend time with myself and my brother and his wife, my mom. And so he kept it small on purpose, to be flexible, not on his feet. However, there's no safety net. I mean, there just wasn't. I mean, he had some, some of the bare bones kind of safety net in that he owned his own house, but that was about it. So I got to be mentored by the grind itself, by growing up in and around it, and really understanding that my dad's whole thing was, if it's to be, it's up to me. Like I got to go out and create it. He didn't want to depend on anybody. He didn't want to rely on anybody. He didn't believe in taking handouts. He just was like, I got to go get it. And so that was my first kind of bedrock foundational piece of understanding business. That was my perspective on business. Right now, as I got older and had my dreams began to get a little bit bigger. My vision for what might be possible for myself got bigger. And my dad's business, which I ended up working in for a number of years, and I started at the bottom and over time worked my way up to eventually leading the company and taking over for my dad as kind of that lead strategy and, just call it a CEO. It's kind of hard to call it a CEO when it's such small business, but that, essentially that's the idea. And that business, however, served our core client base was people of great affluence. I mean, really, really, really great. Well, some of the wealthiest people out there, right? Movie stars, high net worth. This was our geographical focus was Carmel, Pebble Beach, those kind of areas. And so I got to be and at one point in the career, I was the head sales guy. Um, kind of maintain that even into my evolution into like the overarching business management leadership. But so I was in conversations, making deals, kitchen counter deals with people that were, I mean, worth more than I could even comprehend. And so watching how they operated, watching how they, paying attention to how they made decisions, paying attention to how the questions they asked me, what mattered to them, and really spending the time. I dedicated myself to getting good at sales. And I know when people hear the word sales, if you haven't been in it, it's a whole world and universe unto itself. Just like anything, there's the casual, salesperson who's selling a widget, at a retail place or selling a car somewhere. And then there's people that are developing sophisticated, complex deals with multiple stakeholders. That's all called sales, right? So it's a broad field, and it's maybe reframing from thinking that you're selling something to somebody that they don't need and trying to convince them of that. Really, at the end of the day, if you're truly good at that craft, you're just helping people get more of what they want or get what they want, and you're helping them make a good decision in doing that. Even to the point where if you get really good, you know that you may not be the best fit, and you even have you or your product may not be the best fit, and you're able to convey that, which tends to have its own follow behind kind of value. Anyway, long story short, yes, I found that my question was, if I were to someday get into that level of where these are not just my customers, but somehow my peers, thinking from the terms of how would I one day get an investor? How would I get one of these wealthy people to mentor me and show me how they did it? Because my dad was very entrepreneurial, but he wasn't creating a wealth, that just generational wealth. It just wasn't what he was doing, which was okay. I mean, it played out wonderfully for me and our family. However, I did have big aspirations. And so it was like, how would I get not just to, it's one thing to have these kind of folks as a customer. It's another thing to get them to like want to support you in some endeavor, which eventually took me many, many years, a lot longer than I thought it would take to get to a point where one of these types of folks actually wanted to invest in an idea that now is this company, MYNT. And so it was a lot of asking a lot of questions. One thing I found is that people's favorite subject is themselves, and that's just across the board. It's just true. It's just human nature, in an authentic way, And so I learned that one of the best ways to sell or to build the relationship that required to be in a transaction with somebody is trust and likability. One of the quickest ways to earn trust and likability is to ask people about themselves. And there's been, scientific papers written on this and studies done in the psychology of how quickly you can build rapport by asking somebody about them. Not about telling them about you, but asking them about them. And in the act of telling you about them, they feel a connection. There's a connection made. And so I got good at asking lots and lots of questions and building relationships with these folks. Some lasted many, many years and were repeat customers, and some were very brief. But the one thing I realized was that the only way that I'll get a mentor is if I'm bringing some value to them. Some folks are looking for people to mentor, but most people don't want to waste their time. And now having the opportunity to be on the other side of that equation of where I choose to put my time in mentorship for others is somebody really paying attention? Do I really believe that they're giving it everything they got, or are they just playing the game? And that's what I see a lot of on social media is people that are just kind of saying the words and playing the game, and they want to be successful and they want to be great, but are they really doing everything it takes and sacrificing everything else in the meantime to get there? And I think that that's part of what's required to get folks that have the means and that have the experience to give you their time. They have to believe that you care as much about your success as they would put time into it. And you also have to have potentially an outcome for them. What are they getting out of it? And again, some just want to mentor and they just want to see you be successful. And that's this kind of, altruistic approach to it. And then some are like, hey, I'm not going to put my time in anything that doesn't have a business. Like my time is the most, and it's true for all of us, but it's the most limited resource we have. It's the most finite resource we have. And if I'm going to put my time in something, I want to see the returns on it, right? And so that's where you get into this investor, kind of relationship. So yes, I had some mentors. Most of them came through some other work I did in sales training, and training large sales organizations, because I'd really gotten good at it over the years of just high repetition, man. I was doing 5 or 6 pitches a day, to pretty successful folks. And so I honed my craft, and I read all the books on it, and on sales as an art and a craft, and how to be really good at it. I read a lot about the mechanics of business, and how my dad was looking at things as a somewhat of a transactional, as when selling our product in that business was more of like, I'm solving a need for these folks, and they're going to pay me to do that, right? Which is, sure, that's true. However, I started to look at things as like repackaging, reframing it as an investment, and the idea that we're showing them how to not only solve their immediate need, but also look at it from a standpoint of an investment. What is the return on that investment? And so I started wrapping more context into that conversation. And that's really when I got to unpeel the onion a little bit and understand how folks of means thought about things. And the more that I understood their side of things, the more they would share. Right. And so I got good at this. I got asked by some friends that had started a big, well-backed company to be one of their lead sales training guys. And so I'd fly to different parts of the country. They were building a national organization and train new sales folks. Right. And through that, I got some mentorship with folks that had done big things in business. And that was where, you don't really know something until you have to go teach it. My experience. Right. And you hear a lot of athletes say that, man. You think you know your sport until you have to go coach, right? And that's true. I really got to a chance to go deep on the psychology of what it was that I thought I was already good at, and understand things at a deeper level, because I was having to teach it. And so I built some of my own kind of strategies and programs that I still use today, and I still talk to people. I still use a little more subtly now, but as kind of sales training or business development training. And so long answer for a pretty simple question was mentors. So yes, I have not necessarily had somebody that's like, that's my mentor. He calls himself my mentor and I call him my mentor. It's been more of building relationships where there was some of that core fundamental. Do they like me? Do they trust me? Do they think I can help them get what they want? And that outcome, again, could just be altruistic. They just want somebody that's going to work hard and pay attention and learn from what they tell them. Sometimes it's a monetary thing. Like, am I going to help them make more money in their business? And both are true. So over the years, there's probably 10, I could list as like really people I really learned a lot from. But for me, I was more of like one of those people that I want to get the best out of everybody. Like, and so anybody I came in contact with in business, I don't care if it was the facilities manager at some building that I was trying to sell my product to. I want to know how he thinks, how he makes decisions. How did he get where he's at? Where did he work before he got there? I mean, I'd know somebody's whole bio within an hour, kind of sales pitch, just because that's how I did it. I asked a lot about them. Invariably, people will eventually ask you about you. But I'm telling you, it's like magic. You spend 45 minutes asking them all about them. The last 15 minutes, it's not even selling, man. They're just like, all right, so tell me, what do you need? Like, how do we get this going? Like, it's just magic, right? And so I guess my answer, to be more concise, kind of package it up here, is because I've burned a lot of time on this one answer, is just simply that I sought out to try to understand the psychology of everybody that I came in contact in business, because everybody was a mentor to me. If you're really, really trying to get good at your craft and starting business, developing a business, developing new markets, selling, whatever thing you're in, understanding everybody is your mentor because they have what you want, money. They have the revenue you're looking for, right? So you better understand how they think. So I think that the market in general has been my mentor. But yeah, I've had some people that really have pointed the light, shown the light down the road a little bit for me, for sure.
I think what was really interesting though about your whole story around this is there's a curiosity at the base of all of it. And I think I don't know, one of the gifts that I've been able to have through holding a camera and documenting stuff my entire career is I get to spend 30 minutes with
You're getting
highly
that education,
operating
right?
CEO side. And and I realized pretty early on that, I got to sit down with, heads of companies, and I got to ask whatever I wanted for 30 minutes, anything I wanted, because at the end of the day, we're looking for an objective of a video, but you gotta get there and get the trust. And I realized that throughout production, I would learn so much, not just from the CEO, but then, correct, I'd go hang out with the facilities person, the whole person in the supply chain, and you just
Dude,
ask questions.
look at
How does
how
that
it
work? What
works.
does
I
that
mean,
do?
you're one of the most prime examples of how it works, right? I fell in love with you early on because of your commitment to what it is you were doing. You were truly driven. You had thought through so much of what you were trying to achieve in business. And then you turned it around on me and spent a lot of time asking me about me. And then ultimately it turned into a bit of a mentor-mentee, kind of relationship, because you were starting out a business that, and I had a little bit more time ahead of you in doing that same thing. So I was just sharing some of my experience, right? But you spent a lot of time asking me questions, which then of course causes me to be even more deeply endeared with you. And then look, you end up here, right? Like I saw very clearly over time the value that you bring to the market. You were just trying to do it in a vehicle it was a difficult strategy, right? And just taking that strategy and bolting it onto this company at the right time, right place, it worked out great, and now it's a win-win. That is the prime example, I think, of how it works in business. Is that you are now ended up at Mint, creating this incredible vision and art and executing on something that's been buried in my head for years, and it's all because you were so good at asking those questions and being interested and being curious. And to your point, two things, man: be humble enough to know that you don't know it all, so you can ask authentic questions, and then truly be curious enough to want to ask questions. Like, it's that simple, dude. And I think a lot of people just aren't humble enough to assume that somebody else, like, I mean, dude, there was times where I would get a deal done because of some question I asked the janitor walking through a building, doing a site walk, and I'm there to meet with the, head of facilities or whatever it is, and I'm touring around, and he'd be off looking at something, and I would just grab, for whatever reason, I'd start up a 10-second, 30-second conversation with the guy, the janitor, the maintenance guy or whatever, and he would give me some little piece of insight, like, oh, dude, that whole half the building is way too hot over there. Those people complain all the time. And I would take that little nugget and turn that into what would end up being the close on the deal, right? So I guess truly being curious and knowing that you can learn something from anybody and not being too good to ask those questions. And that, to your point, is curiosity. You have to cultivate that desire to be truly curious. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and
No,
I'd also like to.
Dude, you're a master at that, man. Like, you are so good at asking questions that, I mean, dude, it's amazing. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I also wanted to kind of mention we can keep names out, but we were introduced by a mutual friend of ours that he would probably never say that he is my mentor, but I will gladly say that he is mine.
Isn't that the case though? I think guys rarely say like, "Oh yeah, I mentor that kid." Like, it's more just like they do them, and you get to call them your mentor, right? It's like we choose a mentor; they don't.
And it's so funny. Like I'm starting to get to a little bit of this point. At least in my career trajectory, where I've done it long enough, where I've made a lot of mistakes and learned a lot of lessons, and I've had some people start to ask me questions.
Yep,
and of course, you're like, yeah, Saturday phone call, Sunday phone call, sure, we'll spend a couple hours and love to go deeper with you but then the other side of it too is like, I always thought that part of that role was to, I was always looking for answers, right? And I always got guidance, which I think is a very, very important thing. It's not about the answers. It's getting a point in the right direction.
Yep.
Because I'm realizing that some of those answers that I'm seeing from the other side that they're wanting, I'm like, the answer's not going to help.
Well,
a point in the right direction might.
Speaking of Andy, like he's really one of his, well, we don't have to say his last name, but, but he's really super good at turning it right back around to you and asking you the question. So you're going, what do I do? What do I do? Blah, blah, blah. And he goes, well, I don't know. What do you think the market wants? Or what do you think, what are you good at? Like, he'll just toss it back in your court and you're like, oh crap. Like, you're right. It's that simple. Like, and so, that reflective, to your point, that reflective nature of a good mentor, I think is powerful, where they can cause you to have to dig a little deeper. Because I think when you're new in business, you don't realize you've got to go deeper. There's a whole world full of like surface level business folks and ideas that just, until you go deep and ask yourself the real question, why in the hell am I doing this? What is inspiring to me? Like, to me, changing lives is why I started this company. Absolutely love clean energy. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's obviously we started a company to go deliver energy efficiency and clean energy to the world. However, the reason I started the business, the real why for me in my heart is people. How many lives can I change, right? Or be a part of change or support change, positive change, right? So getting in touch with that takes some digging, dude. I would not have gone through the ups and downs and the just brutality of 15-hour days for years starting a company if it was just about like, how do I put more solar on more roofs? Like, that's not, I mean, that's a great mission, but it's like, there's plenty of people doing that. I had to attach it to the deeper why, for me, which was stories like we have with you, and many, many others here. It's just like, how many lives can just unfold and blossom and grow. And someday you'll be leading, teams of people having your own conversations around mentorship and guidance and stuff with new people. And it's just, I love that. You mentioned something that made me think there's also something that happened for me, which I became very aware of some universal laws that just, call them mystic, whatever you want, esoteric, they're real. And one is the law of reciprocity, right? You can't, it ties into this idea of abundance, right? As a mindset versus scarcity as a mindset, or the creative mindset versus the competitive mindset. Competitive mindset is a scarcity mindset. Creative mindset is an abundant mindset. And the law of reciprocity says essentially that where you give, you will receive, right? It's the way the universe works. And if you just look at how nature works, this tree is producing this beautiful fruit and then the birds get to eat it. Well, then the birds go fly and dookie somewhere and drop that seed and there's a new tree. And it's just like, it's this kind of thing. And so in order to receive, you have to be willing to give. And it should not be the idea of transactional, because again, that goes back
I was about to say that.
Yeah,
it
goes back
big
to that
caveat.
It's very easy to go into the scarcity mindset and think it's quid pro quo or transactional. I'm going to give, therefore I expect to get. It's more of like, I am coming from a position that I have so much and there's a never-ending supply coming to me that I can freely give, knowing that I will always get. I will always have what I need. And I had to go back and search out it started in some of the sales books that I was reading, where they started getting into some of this psychology and some of this mindset. And I go, God, this sounds kind of spiritual almost and mystical a little bit. And then I would go, who inspired that guy? And I would read that book, and then I would go, who inspired that? Where did that come from? And I'd read that book. And I mean, I'm going back into the turn of the century stuff. I mean, last century stuff, the early 1900s, the New Thought stuff, where Think and Grow Rich was actually, most of that book, which everybody knows that book, was stolen from Wallace Wattles' original The Science of Getting Rich, which don't be turned off by the title, The Science of Getting Rich. Getting rich meaning a rich life. Not all about money, right? But the fullness of life. And then I would go, where did he get these ideas? And I'd go figure that out and research and find who, the writing, the previous author or whatever. And man, I traced that all the way back down to like ancient Egypt, over years and years of like research and study. And then that led me into going, well, wait, where is science? Is there any science that's proving some of these mystical, esoteric concepts at all? And that led me into reading a lot about quantum mechanics and quantum physics. And now there's this overlapping, intermeshed, intertwined, scientific study that's basically confirming the physics of this actually happening, which goes back to these ancient principles, whether it's ancient Egypt, ancient India. I mean, these really mystical kind of concepts, but it all boils down to some of these basic laws, right? And the idea that we shape our reality based on our decisions, our choice, our mindset, our perception. And so I would say some of my biggest mentors were some of these authors, where I wouldn't just read a book once. I would read a book 5 times and I would try to read between the lines. Like, what are they saying with kind of behind There's a deeper meaning here. And if you really go back and look at some of Einstein's, quotes, they mean a lot more than just the surface. You can read it and get A, but there's B and C behind that if you really think about it. And I started to realize that there was kind of a secret code, not so secret, only secret to those that aren't willing to go deeper and explore it. And so I began to realize that we have the power to shape our reality and our future. And then from there, as I was mentioning before, getting into doing these sales trainings, I was trying to lace in some of these more esoteric concepts into not freaking people out or trying to be some mystical guru up on stage training them, but more so just like, and so I boiled it down to a very simple recipe of success. It would to how do my idea was like, how do I take this and make it as simple as possible and as digestible as possible and as easy to assimilate as possible to where people can go apply it in their lives. And so for me, I live by a pretty simple set of three-step process that I almost any new endeavor in my life I follow, which is simply the 3 steps are vision, belief, and action. And so you have to get a crystal clear vision of what it is you want, what it is you're trying to achieve. And when I say vision, man, like you better like spend time like in that place, in that, how do you feel if that were to be true? How would it look, smell, taste? How are people interacting with you? And, when that reality is there. And so almost like you can go to that little daydreamy place and it's a real place. It's a real thing, whether it's a new car or it's a business or whatever it is. And from that, you begin to cultivate belief that it's just a matter of time between that being your reality and now. And through that belief, developing that belief in it, or some, might call it faith, which is just belief in things yet to come, right? Or things yet to be seen, or things not seen. But you're seeing it in your mind. And that belief, if cultivated and anchored well enough, will cause you to begin to take action. And when I say take action, it's taking action based in that belief as if that thing is already happening. And so you start showing up every day as if you are the millionaire, or as if you are the CEO of a 45-person company, like you take action as if that's your current reality. And sure enough, over time, it begins to become your reality. And I've seen it play. It sounds crazy, but I've seen it play out over and over and over in my life. And I could spend 3 hours talking on the subject and the books that, and what they say and how it all works. But ultimately, that idea of manifesting, which is kind of a cheesy thing that's thrown around these days, but there's a real process there.
Well, and I want to unpack it a little bit too, because like I think one of the harder things, because I've also gone very deep on these topics too. It could be part of where we grew up, but also just the concept of, I think we're all searching for whatever we're meant to do, that purpose in life. And I think that fundamental question, I think, is what stops a lot of people from either the vision, the action, the belief, all of those types of steps. I think people get stuck on that first one of like, what is the vision? Because in some way you have society saying you should do this, or this would be a great path for you, or go this way and you'll be successful. But is that right for the person? And then you start to question that. And then of course, over those chapters of a career or a lifetime, you go through transitions too, where you go through, I'm doing this in life, and then I'm doing the next thing in life, and the next chapter. And I think you reach these points where oftentimes we see them as midlife crisis where somebody buys a Corvette. But oftentimes it's that moment where someone's like, what's purpose to them? And how do you go about finding that?
Dude, I was going to say, I think the moment you can truly understand your life's purpose, it changes everything. The velocity in your ability to create goes exponential. Tony Robbins talks about it. I remember because one of the things I did early in my career, I went from being an installer, a guy in the labor force in my dad's company, to taking the leap to go into sales. And there was this discussion between him and I, like where he was afraid to hand these leads off to me with no experience that were the lifeblood of our family. Right. And if I don't close them at the rate that he does, we're losing money as a family, as a business, and employees and everything else. So there was
Some
always
pressure.
this like there was always this pressure and this drive for me to prove to my dad that I could do it. And in my mind, back in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to be better than you someday. Now you have to know my dad's my freaking hero, right? So like that's a big statement for me. I mean, you know, he could have been. He was so good at what he did. He could have been a multi-millionaire many times over if he had gotten into corporate sales. He just didn't want to play the game, right? And I mean, he had, you know, like places like Lawrence, you know, Berkeley Labs, like trying to recruit him and stuff. Like, I mean, he's just a special dude, but he just didn't want to play the corporate game and didn't want to, you know, play by other people's rules. So anyway, I jump in and I'm like, how do I get good quick, dude? You know, so one night I'm sitting there, you know, and I'm watching, this is back when there was no internet, and there's infomercial comes on for Tony Robbins, you know, early days Tony Robbins. I mean, he's young, dude, right? He's still got the weird suit and the big giant guy in a weird suit, you know, and he's on this infomercial and like, and he's pitching this box set of CDs, not even DVDs at the time. It's CDs, right? You listen to them. And because of what I was doing in sales, I was on the road all day. I just had a lot of windshield time. And so I did not have the money. And he's talking about this. He's like, you don't have the money. I know you don't have the money, but trust me, you got to believe that if you invest in yourself, you will have the money, right? And it was this kind of, he was already using these kind of abundance mindset principles on you to buy his stuff. And I'm like, am I just getting sold this big weird dude's bullshit, you know? And I just was like on a whim, I just did it, right? And again, I really did not have the money to spend. It was like $350. And for me at the time, that was like, dude, like, you know, I didn't have it. So I mean, I had it, but it needed to go other places.
Yep.
And I just listened to him over and over and over. And one of the things he talks about is finding your core purpose. You can go back in your childhood and look and say what it was that when you were a little kid and the teachers ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? What was your answer?
Pro golfer.
And then you go into okay, pro golfer, or for me, it was like geologist, fireman. Like I had a couple, 2 or 3 different ones. What is the commonality in those? Like, what is it that and like, you have to look at the deeper thing. So my 3 were, weird as these sound, philosopher, geologist, and I think architect, and maybe fireman. And I'm like, what do those things really mean? And Tony Robbins talks about this. Like a geologist, the idea would be that you're uncovering something unseen and bringing something beautiful out for everybody to see or use or whatever, right? You're kind of uncovering something. You know, a fireman would be obviously, you know, you're trying to help people. You want to serve, right? An architect is that you want to create. You want to create something lasting that's there, that is used and seen and appreciated by others. You know, a philosopher is like, you want to share great ideas. You want to spend time thinking about ideas and then have the opportunity to share them. Well, if I look at my life now, all of those things are happening 100%. You just have to dig deeper again, right? You have to unpack, like, what is the real meaning? Like, do I really want, no, I would be the worst geologist on planet freaking Earth, dude. Was not what it meant. Like, but there was something about it that I loved, right? And I used to collect little beautiful rocks when I was a kid and stuff. So my point is, you have to be willing to do the deeper, look deeper. And the minute you can come up with, my suggestion on coming up with your life's purpose is something that no matter what it is you're doing, you can connect it to, right? So I'll just share here. It typically is a simpler statement than people realize. My life's purpose is to inspire positive change. That's it. Three words: inspire positive change. That's what my life is for. That's what I live for. That's what I do. No matter what I'm doing that, right? And sometimes it's just inspiring and hoping that there's some positive change. You know, sometimes I'm getting to wrap it all together, but when you can get in touch with that is your core why that then you bring with you everywhere. Doesn't matter what you do. So I think people work the wrong direction and they think like, that it has to be a derivative effect of what it is they're actually doing now or what it is they think they want to do. No, it's something that lives in you no matter what it is you're doing. If you're cutting the lawn, I'm inspiring positive change in that I'm trying to, you know what I mean? Like I'm making my yard pretty or I'm, you know, making my wife happy or whatever it is, right? So, yeah.
I always had this thought of, like I went deep on the golf one, because I was like, I was a good golfer, but I wasn't going to go pro. And I was like, why do I love it? And it's this game that you can't actually win. It's impossible to win the game of golf. You can beat other people, but you can't. It's you versus the course and it's you versus yourself. And that's when it got interesting. It was like, what am I chasing here? And it's the idea of how far can I take this really big challenge and push myself as far as I can possibly go to be not as perfect as possible, but perform at the highest level I possibly could in service of others. Golf wouldn't be in service of others, but the idea of pushing whatever I'm working on as far as I possibly can to...
Well, you're talking about a never ending. The greatest golfer in the world will still tell you that they're not that good and they have more to learn and better to get, right?
Yep.
And so you're talking about a never ending pursuit that requires constant attention on how to improve. You have to be in the mindset of constant never ending improvement. I mean, I see all that in you 100%, dude.
Well, it's also, it's a game of, people think it's a game of perfection, and it's actually a game of risk management.
Yeah.
It's knowing that it's not going to go perfect, and how do you best navigate it? And now that I've started to see that a lot more clearly,
that's
it's
business,
like,
by the way.
Yeah, exactly. It's business. And I learned that a lot doing filmmaking too. It was, no shoot is ever going to go to plan. Something's going to go sideways. A card will fail. A battery will die. You know, I forgot my camera one time.
Bro.
Literally forgot the camera.
I never connected that with you.
Yeah.
Golf and filmmaking are there's a lot of commonality there.
Well, I went right into doing triathlon too, which is a very individual sport. And I always wondered why, because I played team sports as well, but I wondered why I trended more towards individual sports. And it was because I was very curious to see how far I could take things as my person when I'm up against a really big challenge.
Sure. Yeah, I would implore people to spend a little time coming, and it can change. You know, don't think that you write this in stone and it's what you live with forever. You can always evolve your core, your core personal core purpose, right? But, come up with something that does have the flexibility to remind you why you exist as a human being, what satisfies you at your soul level. That soul purpose might be the better way of saying it. What were you born here to do? And, at one point for me, it was as simple as just, to spread love, to share love, right? And that's okay. But for me, I had to refine a little bit further, and that's where I ended up where I'm at. It may change in 5 years. I don't know. But, I would say that that's a big thing, is to get to a point where you, if you haven't tapped into that, tap into that. That what is my purpose? What is it that I am here to do? And it should be something that no matter what you're doing, you can be doing it too.
Does it go back to, I guess, the effort from, like, going back to earlier, of that curiosity of asking people around you, taking in as much information, kind of being a sponge? Is it kind of going on a walk in the woods and trying to start to figure it out that way? Is it a mixture of both? Because I think also people are like, I could read all these books and now I'm really going this way, but maybe they skipped over what do I really want out of things? How did you end up doing it?
I had to develop, one of the things I read somewhere in one of the books, probably in many of them, but was that you have to create a workshop of the mind, or carve out time in your day where you are literally spending time on you at the deepest level. So for me, that tended to be get up really early. I started training myself to be able to get up at 5 a.m. Before the world starts, right? And my two things were what I reminded myself every day, that especially days that I didn't want to get out of bed, is in order for me to get to the success that I want, I've got to give myself an edge. I've got to beat the world. So the world starts, business starts at 8, 9 a.m. People get up a little bit earlier than that. I want to get ahead of them. Like, how do I get, and not in competitive, but just like, what advantage can I give myself? And again, I didn't go to higher education. I kind of invested that time in myself. And so I would get up I still do to this day, get up in the morning, read something that is going to inspire me, whether it's some of these principles that we're talking about, maybe it's scriptures. That's been that for me at certain points in my life. It could be a business book that's going to inspire you. Just get into that inspired kind of mode. And then for me, it's some prayer, where, not the traditional prayer, religious prayer, but prayer as verbalizing my appreciation, my gratitude, my intention, my acceptance of what's to come, my, just really embracing that abundance mindset. And then from there, go into meditation. Now, there's many forms of meditation, as we know. And there's been plenty of time in my life where it's more true meditation, kind of the emptying of the mind, allowing the thoughts to arise, but don't hold on to them. Just let them come and go and just witness them. Just be in touch with the witness behind the personality, behind the thinking. There is a consciousness behind the thinkingness, and just being in that place is powerful. And then there's more of what you might call active meditation, which is, again, almost akin to daydreaming, where I'm building that vision. I'm actually in that workshop. I'm actually what would this look like? What would I need to do? And really reverse engineering outcomes, and I'm in that silence, just letting my mind be creative and letting these ideas come up, and all of a sudden you connect a dot that you didn't see before, and that's the breakthrough. And that process is where I came up with a lot of the ideas that led to businesses and trainings and strategies, and a lot of what we are seeing play out in as an overarching strategy in this company, in this vehicle now here, comes from that time that I spend in that very creative silence.
That's such a good answer. Because I agree with you. I was never a morning person, to be honest. I was always the edit to 3, 4 in the morning and then sleep until 8 on a really stressful time period. And so I was always that like wake up at 8 kind of person. Now I'm that early riser, and I totally 100% agree with you. It's that process of like in the morning, first thing I do is I journal, and then because that's something that helped me a lot with kind of figuring out where my mental state is, and it's the stream of consciousness kind of journaling. It's just like let your brain just kind of open up, and then I immediately go do some breath work. And it's like if you allow yourself to settle, and then I go outside, go for a little run or a walk or whatever that is.
Yeah.
And it's all before the world wakes up. I get so much more clarity on what it is that I'm trying to get out of every single day. Am I on track with where I kind of wanted to be? And then also like a lot of the visualization, I remember, obviously athletes are probably the best way to describe this, but like a lot of the times they visualize their performance, whether it be on the court, on the field, whatever it is. And I was like, well, what if you just, and it just goes back to the visualization. What if you just visualize where you want things to be before you go to bed? Because that whole thing of like, if you listen to classical music or whatever it is when you go to sleep, it'll help your brain retention and all that kind of stuff. Could you learn while you sleep? And it was like, well, if you visualize before you go to sleep, will that improve?
Think of it this way: whatever you set the intention before you go to bed, because the subconscious is the most powerful thing in the universe, in my opinion. It is truly, we have no idea. The subconscious could be the fabric of the unified consciousness, could be described as the fabric of the unified consciousness that is behind everything, is our subconscious as individuals. It's this, the ancient Indians called it the Ashtak records. And meaning that there's a recording of all history, every moment, every second of everything that ever existed is just sitting there, accessible to anyone, right? At the subconscious level. Carl Jung goes deeply into the subconscious. Read about that. It's amazing.
Love Carl Jung.
I feel like planting the seeds at night before you go to bed, plant the seed, the intention for the next day. That morning ritual in the morning is the watering of that seed.
Yes.
Yes. I find that over the day, I'm collecting things in a big bag that I'm carrying on my back, right? It's collecting clutter. By the end of the day, that clutter is clouding my vision, right? And so I've got to set that bag down at the end of the day. And then, my evenings tend to be trying to normalize, get into a more chill state. And then before bed, you can plant some of those seeds. You talk about visualization. I want to bring up something I read a long time ago. This started with a prisoner of war in the Vietnam conflict. And this guy was a golfer, and he gets locked up in a, Viet Cong prison camp for, I think, something like 6-7 years. Like, I mean, one of the longest, like, dude. And I mean, starvation, like not let out of his cage, at all, had nothing. And so he's like, this is torture. And he just said, well, I'm just going to start playing golf in my head. He went in, I think, something like a 7 handicap. I'm just going to, using what I think I remember, but something like a 7 handicap. He went into the war. He had golfed his whole life, like you. And then for 6-7 years, he's not physically active. He's not swinging a club, but he's playing round after round of golf in his mind, picturing every shot, every lie, every putt, and just over and over for 6-7 years. He comes out, actually has to rehab his body, nourish and everything. He goes out to play his first round of golf. he's shooting scratch, and he was just like a scratch golfer, right? So this became the
Wow.
basis of some scientific research. Like, is
Mhm.
visualization truly something that can be as good as the physical application? Kobe Bryant is now, rest in peace, but famous for spending as much time practicing in his mind as he did on the court, which was a lot of time. And he attributed a lot of his ability to perform based on that mental visualization of things. And now science is done. They've done actual studies on this to see where they've got, I guess, double blind, right? Where you've got your
Mhm.
group that is actually physically practicing, not spending any time thinking about it, a group that's doing both, and then a group that's just visualizing, and the
Mhm.
group that not physically practicing at all. And the group that's not physically practicing at all stays just as good as the group that's physically practicing. And now, of course, the people that are physically practicing and visualizing are far superior. But it's freaking amazing, dude. So, I'm not a scientist, and don't ask me to get into all of it, but I can tell you that it's real. You know,
Mhm.
that the more you crystallize a vision for what it is you want to become or what it is you want to have, the more you attract it. We get into those quantum physics kind of concepts of just attracting. The universe is just this weird, malleable, pliable thing that just begins to like kind of conspire on our behalf where we have intention and focus. Um, and there's also just the thing that you're going to take action in the direction of the thing that you're visualizing. And the more clear and crystal and deeply embedded in you that vision is, um, the more likely it is to happen. Now, the one thing I would caution people on is it doesn't always show up exactly. Like halfway there,
Mhm.
it's going to show up and you're going to go, that's not it. I want a red Corvette. Why is this guy, giving me this super good deal on a yellow Corvette? Right. Well, you know what I'm saying? Like it's
Yep.
that kind of thing. And so you have to be sensitive to like, is this a version of it that maybe,
Mhm.
and for me, it's always played out to be better than I could have even imagined it to be. I just need
Mhm.
to be sensitive enough to the idea that it's showing up. It's just not exactly how I thought it would go. Right.
I used
And
to
so
always have expectations around every single thing of like I want it to go this way, and then when it went, it was like check the box, cool. And I think I don't know, at a certain point, I realized that setting expectations is also an opportunity to be disappointed. Whereas if you come in without expectations, you're kind of always pleasantly surprised, positive or
so
negative. You're kind of
I
like, oh, I didn't see that one coming.
Dude, I just saw a clip from Tony Robbins this morning on Facebook or something where he was talking about replace expectations with appreciation. Meaning,
Mhm.
if you're visualizing, you're appreciating the thing
Mhm.
that you're visualizing. You have appreciation and gratitude for it, even though it hasn't come. That's the emotion that you're cultivating. Whereas when you set your sights so strongly on something that has to be a certain way, that's the expectation that tends to end up in that scarcity mindset. You tend to slow
Mhm.
yourself down. It doesn't work as good. You maybe aren't as sensitive to the zigs and zags in the path to get to where you're going. And
Mhm.
so I think appreciation for the thing so that any version of it is still good, right? Because you're just in this appreciative state. That's a powerful, it's subtle, but it's a powerful thing. Remember that book, The Secret, that then turned into the movie, and it was like kind of a big phenomenon like 10 years ago. It was like, I don't, maybe it was longer, but The Secret was like this big
Mhm.
thing that was everywhere, right? One of the things they talk about is just pick something small, start with something small, which I think is not a bad idea because um it gives you practice. And then when something small shows up, you're like, oh, there's evidence that it works, right? So then you can begin to expand your vision, right?
Yep.
That said, I argue that that's also not that great of an idea just because something so small is hard to be passionate about. It's hard to give every fiber of your being to as like something you truly desire. It's like, oh, I need a new toaster. Like, how inspired can you get around that, right? But like,
Mhm.
still, the idea is that as you get good at these kind of mystical, esoteric practices, like you do find that there's no limit to, why keep it small. And I'm even realizing that about myself at this point. I'm like, well, my vision's way too small right now. Like I've gotten this, I'm sitting here enjoying the fruits of many, many, many years of vision and work to get to where I'm at. And yet that's not like, why wouldn't I go see how many more people I can help? And you know what I mean? Like, why wouldn't I expand that vision? And so that's what I'm in the process of doing now.
That's outstanding. Well, Derek, I am very appreciative of your time hopping in on this.
Hope I met your expectations.
Oh, honestly, I what I love is we're able to have these conversations because I think it is such a peek into like what we're doing at Mint and kind of the impact that we are having. It's driven by people
Yeah.
at every level of the company, and every person that is at Mint and or your mindset is growth, it's abundance, and I think the more that we can kind of show that there's a way to do it, and there's a way to also just accept
I
that
mean,
it's
you're
part of a process.
for sure. And, realizing too that you're part of an experiment right now. One of the theories that I've had is what happens if not just the leadership of an organization thinks like this and uses these principles and like really goes deep like that. What if somehow you can inspire everybody in an organization to do that? Like, what would happen then? Like, what if they all had a somewhat unified kind of, vision for how the company and the organization can go, and then how that ties to them personally and their dreams. And so as you see me like kind of working with people around that, that's part of the experiment, is to see what happens, and you gotta be careful that you're not like creating some kind of cultish thing, because that's not it at all. It's more just like, dude, inspired people do great things, period, end of story, dude. And so how do you get people inspired, man? And then line them up, get people aligned in a common mission, dude. It's like, I feel like to some extent at this point, it's a little bit like, it's much more of a guiding thing as opposed to early days. It was like I'm driving a thing, and now it's more of like I'm just kind of gently guiding things because it's got a life of its own. It's amazing to watch. So yeah, it's fun, and I think there should be a part 2 and 3 of this conversation because there's so much more to get into here. But so much fun for me to talk about this, and I do have to hand it back to you and say thank you for having your own vision for how to get these kind of things out to the world. Tapping into these conversations is just, it's phenomenal. We don't get to talk about this kind of stuff enough. Like how do you get from A to B, or how do you go from rags to riches, or how do you, it's the kind of stuff that more people need to know that they don't teach in school.
No, they definitely don't. And there will definitely be a part 2, a 3, a 4, and we'll definitely go deeper on this stuff.
Awesome.
So Derek, thank you. And that is it for this episode of Power to the People. Till next week. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, guys. Energy is inherently a part of everything we do in our lives, but one of the least understood things.
I can see a future where there is limitless and free energy. And that's a pretty beautiful world to live in.